Well, hey friends, welcome to another conversation that we're having here on Facebook every week. During this season of the COVID crisis, we're coming to you each week with wisdom and insight to help you navigate the situations we find ourselves in. Today, we're going to talk about relationships, our marriages, and our partnered relationships. How do we not merely survive this situation, but maybe even thrive? And I'm getting to sit down with a guy named Nate Ellis from our New Creation Counseling Center, an awesome nonprofit partner of Gingelsburg Church, who's doing some incredible work. So Nate, thanks for sitting down today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I've been excited to connect. Tell us just a little bit about what you do at New Creation. What's your role there?
Yeah, so I am a full-time counselor at our main office in Tip City, just down the road from where we're at right now.
Yeah.
And I've starting my third year there. I meet with clients 13 years of age and older.
Okay.
So I don't see really young kiddos, but I see teens and adults. Mm-hmm. And sort of a growing specialty right now for me is couples counseling, which we're going to be talking about a little bit today. And, I also work a lot with mood disorders like anxiety and depression, and trauma as well. So I'd say those are some of the main things that I work with. Yeah,
that's excellent. So I want us to lean in on. I also wanted to say real quick that you are open. Like New Creation is just say that right now.
Yes. No, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
And we are working from home as the counselors, and we are meeting with clients in their homes.
Yeah.
And so that is for all ages, for couples, for individual work. So yes, please. Don't hesitate to reach out to us as we are very much still working with clients.
Yeah, for sure. Is the best way to reach out through your website, or is there a phone number folk can call?
Yeah. So the website, newcreationcounselingcenter.org, I believe.
Yeah.
Hopefully I have that right.
Yeah.
And there is a new phone number for our office since the office staff is working from home too.
Okay.
I don't have that
That's
number
okay.
memorized.
Yeah, we'll snag
the
that.
Website.
We'll snag that, and I'll put it in the comments for folk who are watching. So for sure. But I want to talk about couples today. A lot of couples, whether you're young or old, new or a veteran at it, most of us are huddled up together in our homes. Some of us are trying to figure out how to raise kids. Some of us are empty nesting. Most of us are around one another now in this season more than we typically are. And maybe we're getting on each other's nerves or whatever. It's a new life. It's a new normal for people. So really want to just offer some tips, some advice, some wisdom for couples to make it through this season, and maybe even to thrive. To find and discover some new stuff. So just first, what are some tips just off the top for folks who are living in this new situation in their relationship? What are some tips for couples right now?
Yeah, well, a couple things come to mind. One is having realistic expectations for yourself, for you and your partner, for you as a family. And so I'm kind of a visual person, so I use some illustrations.
Sure.
And so one that I really like that is from Pastor Stan Tharp of Christian Life Center that he talked about at one point was when our expectations are unrealistically high, they might be kind of up here. Yeah. And then, when our reality comes in and it's way down here, there's kind of a big gap between the two. And so that can cause a lot of anxiety. So, I talk with clients a lot about, having our expectations be realistic. So we might have to lower that. And then also doing what we can to bring reality up to meet those expectations. So there's kind of a smaller gap between the two. And so I think that goes for us as couples when I'm working with couples. And so one other kind of just quick tool that I might share. This one's actually from John Jung, who is a counselor as well at New Creation. Yeah. And so he talks about connecting on 3 levels for couples. So connecting on a spiritual level, an emotional level, and a physical level. And he kind of talks about those as rings. So spiritual would be at the center, then you have emotional, and then you have physical. Okay. And so he really suggests that couples connect on those 3 levels daily. And that can look like 3 questions at the end of your day. What was a high point of your day? What was a low point of your day? And what was one way that you saw God show up in your life today for those whose faith is an important part? Yeah. And so asking each other those questions connecting on the emotional and spiritual levels, and then closing out that conversation by holding hands and praying together. So again, connecting physically and spiritually, and that, is a realistic expectation, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, right. and really a way to connect on a daily basis.
Awesome. I love that. So 2 quick tips: realistic expectations, and then daily connect physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Yeah, the circles are a nice way to kind of remember that model. Awesome. Conflict is real, right? We can't avoid it altogether, even in we'll call them normal times, but especially when we're spending a lot of time in close proximity. Especially if there was already some unhealth, right? It's not going to get immediately. It's just going to amplify all that stuff. So talk about conflict. How can we navigate conflict in this season?
Yeah. So, I would say remembering that you and your partner are a team. We can slip into this mindset of where we almost see our partner as like an opponent or as the enemy, if you want to really, exaggerate that. But, I think that it can be easy to slip into that. So I would say, as much as possible, trying to give each other the benefit of the doubt, especially again, during this time. And, there's some different ways that we can do that. I would say focusing on yourself and kind of what maybe is making you a little bit more vulnerable. And so there are a lot of things to consider there. Again, just kind of a quick little tip is the acronym HALT. If you ever heard of the acronym HALT.
Yeah, heard of this.
H is for hungry, A is for angry, L is for lonely, and T is for tired. And those are 4 things that could be going on for you along with others that would be making you more vulnerable to kind of seeing your partner as more of an opponent. So just kind of being aware of that, and then again, not seeing your partner as the problem, and doing what we call externalizing the problem. And what I mean by that is taking that problem from being your partner and kind of setting it out in front of the 2 of you, externalizing it from that person, and kind of facing that problem as a team. So you, again, want to be that team, looking at that problem head on. How do we solve this together? There's a lot more that I could go into there, but
sure.
I'll spare you.
So in the moment of conflict, kind of do maybe a self-check and say, hey, is there some hunger, some anger, some loneliness, some tiredness? Could you give an example, or like maybe walk through, imagine we're in conflict, or I think you recently were married, and you and your wife are in conflict, externalizing, something. That sounded like an interesting exercise.
Yeah. So, I'm just trying to think. I don't think that Giselle will mind if I talk about
you can talk about somebody else
a little bit. I think that we recognize, or are starting to recognize, we've been married going on a year now next month, some of our vulnerabilities. Yeah. And so, actually, as I was talking about this interview with her last night, I was kind of having her help me go through the questions. Yeah. And she was providing some feedback, and I was getting a little defensive. She was providing some feedback, and so we just kind of had to remember, feedback is our friend, right, as we like to say. And so, seeing her as a helpful, person, as my spouse, as my partner, and knowing that she is there for me, has my best interest in mind. And also just being aware of things like hungry, angry, lonely, tired. It was at the end of the day, so I think some of that was going on too. So we were able to externalize that problem and say, okay, we're in this together. Yeah,
man. Thank you for being vulnerable. I know I kind of put you on the spot there. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
And you touched on something. You spent some time communicating. Communication is huge. I think in life in general, we learn in our working teams and with friendships. Communication is a big deal, especially in our marriages and in our most close relationships. So talk a little bit about how we can communicate well right now.
Yeah. So when I speak with couples and with clients about communication skills, I often think about skills of assertiveness and active listening as kind of 2 halves of a whole. And so assertiveness is kind of this ability to express pretty clearly and directly for what you want in a relationship. If we're talking about a couple, and there's a lot that goes into that. I think that one key thing is using what we call I statements. So maybe you've heard of that before. Being careful to not begin a sentence with the word you, as that might make your partner feel like you're attacking them. So
you always, you never. Right?
Exactly.
Instead of that.
Instead of that, saying I, and then through that you're going to be taking more ownership of what you're saying.
Okay.
So that's kind of assertiveness in a nutshell, I would say. And then active listening is a kind of a strange skill at first, because what you're doing is you're repeating back. It feels a little bit strange to repeat back what you're hearing, but you're kind of acting like a mirror for your partner, and you're kind of just reflecting what you're hearing them say. And you can do that through acknowledging the content of what they're saying, and then also the feelings, and by doing that, you're really validating what they're saying.
Okay.
And so you don't even necessarily have to agree with what they're saying, but just repeating back to them, listening very attentively without an interruption, and then reflecting back. I would say those are some really key communication skills.
That's good. And that probably my reflective listening, right? Or active listening, I think you called it. Probably also helps me really truly understand better what they're saying too.
Yes.
I'm less concerned about formulating a response. I'm more focused on, I really want to understand what it is that you're saying. You said there's still room to disagree. I may disagree, but I may disagree more appropriately because I'm actually disagreeing with what you're saying, not with what I think you're saying sincerely. And that gives you an opportunity to kind of check and say, yeah, you're hearing me, right, Rusty? Or I'm not sure you get it yet.
Right. Yeah, it makes a more back and forth conversation, and it really helps us check out our assumptions that we're maybe making. And so that validation of, I always tell clients, you don't have to agree. It's okay, but validation really is valuing your partner's perspective on whatever it is you're talking about.
Yeah, that's good. You talked a little bit about assertiveness and then active listening. To be assertive, you have to actually understand a little bit of what's going on, what I'm needing from the relationship, what I'm wanting. Any tips for people to get clear, push the kind of the relationship to the side just for a second, like for Rusty to come to Renee with a conversation, be able to actually say, hey, this is what I'm needing right now. What can an individual do to be better prepared for that kind of a conversation? Some inner work or some journaling or something? What do you recommend? How do we get in touch with ourselves so we can actually assert ourselves with our spouse?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and you brought up journaling there, and that's another really powerful tool. It's kind of like simple in theory, but journaling every day, that might be overwhelming, but
sure.
But even if you can journal for a few minutes a day, that's kind of a way where you take what's in here and you process it out here. I think there's kind of two main ways to do that. You do that through talking with someone, but then also through writing it out. And I think, if that's something you can do on a regular basis, maybe that's at the end of your day, taking those thoughts, writing them out. Again, if your faith is important to you, praying and really bringing that to God. Those are two main ways. Counseling as well. Individual counseling. We're talking more about couples counseling, but individual counseling can kind of give you another, just way to bounce ideas off of someone, and to especially have someone objective who can kind of give you some feedback on it.
It sounds like processing is really how you identify, and you gave us two there, journaling and talking to someone, whether it's a counselor or even a trusted friend or something like that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, excellent. So I think another thing that couples are trying to do right now, our team is calling folk in our church and just checking in, connecting, caring for them. And one of the things we're hearing from couples are, we're trying to adjust to our kids and each other being together 24/7, basically. How do we get time for just us? Kids are awake, the schedule, the routine is out the window. Any creative ways for couples to connect, especially ones with kids in the house all the time right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it's going to be a, unique situation for every family, for every couple. But I would say, sitting down as a couple or as a family and looking at kind of the general structure of your day. You know, again, you don't want to have these expectations that you're going to structure every minute, because that's maybe not going to be so helpful.
Yeah, not realistic, probably.
Yeah, not realistic, yeah. But, you know, just kind of sitting down and saying like, okay, what does our normal routine look like now? And just, you know, thinking creatively, thinking outside the box. I would say, you know, if you're going to sit down as a family and you have, you know, kids of various ages, you know, still getting ideas from them, you know, as is age appropriate. And then, you know, kind of finding a balance between time together and time apart. You know, you're going to be having a lot of time together under one roof, but, you know, thinking about, you know, how do I get time away, even if that's just in another room, having some uninterrupted work time, or is that, you know, going out and enjoying the weather right now, maybe do some of that alone, maybe do some of that as a family. So, you know, again, it's going to be a, you know, situation by situation kind of a, you know, case, but really looking at that creatively.
Yeah, and it sounds like you intentionally talking through your routine. I loved how you talked about including your kids in that process, not just making all those decisions, you know, unilaterally as a parent maybe, but including the family, incorporating them in, figuring out what our new routine is and how do we each get the time that we need. That's really good. I think counseling can sound scary to people. Because, maybe it sounds like we're broken and we need fixing, or it can maybe have a stigma or some shame about it. I think that's different now than maybe a handful of years ago. It's a little more normalized. I've been through counseling, and it's been incredibly helpful, you know, in my own journey. But I want to talk about two things. One, walk us through a session, what a counseling session looks like with a couple. And again, they're probably unique as well, but, you know, generally what could someone expect? And then secondly, I want to talk about when is the right time, you know, the right time for a couple to say, hey, you know what? I think we need to connect with somebody. We need to add a third party here who's a little more objective than either of us. Or, you know, what are some of the signs we can look for so that it's not too late in our journey, you know, and it almost feels like things are irreparable. So walk us through how you begin working with a couple, and then help those couples who are like, hey, maybe this is for us. Is it the right time to make the call? So.
Yeah. So in general, counseling, and I can speak more so for New Creation, kind of how we structure the sessions.
Sure.
The first session is going to be kind of just an intake appointment. So it's kind of a get to know you session is kind of how I phrase it to clients. And so, you know, that's talking about obviously what's brought them in for counseling, and then just some other general questions, other things that might be going on. And that would be like if there's, you know, like a substance abuse problem, we would want to know about that. If there's a history of trauma, some of those general questions. And so that's kind of your first session. And then from there, second session would be more of what we call a treatment planning session. So that would be diving a little bit deeper into goals. And, you know, I kind of would guide the couple through that. And so we'd be talking about, you know, what do you really want to get out of this time? What do you want to make sure that we focus on, that we work on together? And that really gives me sort of a guide as far as, you know, how I'm going to direct the sessions. And then really from there, every session afterwards is going to be structured differently depending on, you know, whether I'm meeting with a couple or an individual client, you know, how much structure they want. Sometimes the sessions are more just kind of processing what's going on, you know, that day. Other times it's more, I guess, more structured, for lack of a better word. And in that case, you know, I might be kind of using different interventions, and I might be leading them through different exercises to practice some of the skills that would help them to have a healthier relationship. And then I would kind of finish up a session with asking about, okay, now that you have this information, how are you going to practically apply it in your day-to-day life? And just kind of, you know, giving them something to take home with them. And then, you know, we would pick up there next time. I would ask them, you know, hey, how did that go? You know, how did that homework sort of assignment go? And and then just kind of going from there.
That sounds great. How often do you typically do you typically meet once you begin? Is it standard, or what's your rhythm typically?
Yeah, so it does depend.
Okay.
I would say maybe on average every other week,
Okay.
although sometimes weekly, especially if it's a situation that is, I don't know if I want to say more of a crisis, because that would be even maybe more often than just once a week. But I would say starting off, every week, every other week. And then as time goes on, I may not need to meet with a client or with a couple as often. So it's flexible, so eventually I might only be meeting with them once a month. Yeah. But I would say starting off more regularly, kind of like every week or every other week.
Okay, that's cool. And so that sounds like even from the get-go, I mean, there's some self-revealing, there's some vulnerability, but nothing that you said there sounded incredibly terrifying. Again, others may disagree, but thanks for giving us kind of an inside scoop as to what that might look like, maybe demystifying that. You're not out to point fingers and figure out whose fault everything is or something like that, but really to support the couple. And in some ways, it sounds like let them help lead the way in terms of what are your goals, what are you trying to accomplish together. So that's really great. So talk a little bit about when's the right time. What are we looking for in our marriages that might alert us to say, hey, we should probably talk to somebody.
Yeah. So I think that there are 4 kind of characteristics that I would watch out for.
Okay.
And so this comes from the work of Doctors John and Julie Gottman.
Okay.
And so they talk about what they call the 4 horsemen of the kind of apocalypse of a relationship.
Okay.
So
sounds
strong
so
language.
hopeful.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. So these 4 horsemen are criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling.
Okay.
And so I'll go just a little bit into each of those to help you understand. So criticism is where you might frame your kind of complaints as pointing to some kind of inherent defect in the other person. So this is kind of the opposite of externalizing the problem, which we talked about before. It's kind of seeing the problem as something inherently wrong with the other person, and so you're being very critical. Defensiveness, you might think about it as kind of protecting yourself from an attack. So, if your partner has some sort of a constructive kind of comment for you, if you're defensive, you wouldn't necessarily take that in, but you'd kind of turn the tables and you'd say like, well, I might do that, but you do this, So kind of turning the tables. Contempt is a really big one to watch out for. And the Gottmans talk about contempt being actually the number 1 predictor of divorce.
Okay.
So contempt is more where you are looking almost down on your partner, kind of from this position of superiority, and you're kind of seeing yourself as better than them in some way. And then lastly, I know I'm going through these pretty quickly, but lastly is stonewalling. So this is where you kind of put up this wall between you and your partner, and you kind of emotionally withdraw from the relationship. And so that's as well something to look out for if you're kind of isolating from the other person. So essentially, if you're seeing any of those types of things come up, it would be a good sign that we may need some help here. We may need an objective person who can guide us through how do we heal from some of these things.
Yeah, you mentioned the Gottmans. I think is there.
Yes,
that's a resource. Is that something that's an accessible resource, or is that a little more academic in nature? Is it something that someone could grab a book and read a little bit about and learn about?
Yeah. I think some of it is more academic, but certainly a lot of it is accessible to couples who aren't counselors, right?
Right.
And so if you go online and search for the Gottman Institute, so it's Gottman.
Okay.
They have a lot of resources there. They have articles. They also have a lot of books that are out. And a lot of that might be helpful. Okay.
Is there anything particular that they've put out that you found really helpful? And any singular resource?
Yeah, actually, so one that I often use in working with couples is an app, actually.
Okay.
And so if you look up in your app store, Gottman, again, Gottman,
okay.
Card Decks, It's free app, and essentially they are these virtual card decks of questions.
Okay.
And so they kind of help you to get to know your partner better and to build your friendship. And so some of the questions are seemingly kind of random, but for example, they might be, what is your partner's favorite tree? And so you try to guess that, and you kind of make a little bit of a game out of it.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of one of those resources that is easy to access, kind of like you're talking about, and one that I find really helpful.
Yeah, super practical. That's awesome. Any other resources that you would point people to? I mean, obviously, calling New Creation and getting connected with a counselor would be a great step. But we have some self-learners out there who are like, I just want to explore a little bit. Anything else that you'd point people towards?
Yeah, another author I really like, and she does a lot of research too, is Dr. Sue Johnson.
Okay.
If you look her up, she's associated with something called emotionally focused therapy. You don't necessarily need to know that, but if you see that, that's the right Sue Johnson. She has a lot of different books as well. One is called Hold Me Tight. And then the other one is called Created for Connection. Okay. And those are really good ones. And one more author would be Stan Tatkin. That's Tatkin.
Okay.
And he has one called Wired for Love. And so a lot of different really good books out there. Apps would be that Gottman card decks. Another one would be one called Love Nudge, which is associated with the 5 love languages, if you're familiar with Gary Chapman.
Gary Chapman, right?
Yeah. So those are some ones that I often will use.
As we kind of wrap things up, I want to ask you, why do you believe counseling works? You've obviously committed your life to doing this, at least for this season. You said that marriage, couples counseling in particular, is kind of a growing specialty of yours. You believe in it. You spend a lot of time doing it. What do you think it offers to couples? Why does it work?
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned earlier, that counseling can be very intimidating, and I would agree with that, but I also, as a counselor, really want to create sort of a safe emotional environment for that couple to come into, and to just let them know that although a lot of the things we're going to be talking about are very intense, and very, deeply rooted, we're not necessarily going to go there all at once, So we're going to gradually do that. And when I'm working with couples, my overall goal is to help them create a secure attachment, a secure bond, with each other. Yeah. And I think that that comes through this development of a positive view of ourselves and of the other. Sort of this idea of I'm okay, you're okay. And so if our partner can become this secure base, that we can go out from, at the beginning of a day maybe, and come back to at the end of the day, and if we can reach out for them and they're there for us, that's really life-changing. And that's, not only in marriages or in couple relationships, but also in families, in our relationship with God, perhaps. Yeah. Sort of this idea of this bond that we're creating. And I think that counseling can really guide that process and really help that to happen through a healing kind of a process. Yeah,
no, that's really cool. I don't think I don't know any couples who got into this relationship for it to fall apart, right? Or for it to fail. And you talked about the secure base, right? To kind of operate from, to go out from, and to come back to. Just among my friends and colleagues, whatever. I think that's what we're longing for, right? In this most intimate relationship. And so you're saying that counseling can actually help strengthen that and create that thing that we're all kind of, again, I think the reason we get in a relationship to begin with. So, well, hey man, thanks so much again for being here today. I really appreciate your time. I want to talk to our viewers real quick. There is a Gingelsburg Marriage Ministry Facebook group that I would invite you to join, a place where you can find some support, find some connection, get connected with other resources. If you're not a part of the Gingelsburg family or don't feel like you are yet, you're still welcome to join that group. We would love to welcome you in and get you connected that way. Obviously, you can contact New Creation Counseling Center as well and get connected there. Part of what I love about New Creation is that they're committed to helping people regardless of their ability to pay. So they're going to work with you. They believe they're called by God to offer these services. So I would encourage you to connect with them and take that step for your relationship and for yourself today. Again, Nate, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah. Thank you, Rusty.